What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the new best builds tier list and Path of Exile 2. So few days in, and again we have another patch with yet again more changes to a lot of builds that we use and love. So if you are wondering what is the best and most relevant build for every single class and ascendancy, and what new rankings has your build moved to or from, then this is the video for you. And lastly, if you're looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video's description or the pinned comment. So let's start off with the D tier, and the builds that we have right here have been completely nerfed to the ground. And for the one and only, we have Divine Arrow Mercenary. One day developers woke up and said that they don't like poison damage builds, so they completely nerfed them. This build used to leverage the scaling of the gem levels. At level 40 you could deal about 700,000 damage over time. This was also an insanely expensive build, because you would have gained approximately 50% more damage per each level. But now all of this is gone, and for my mercenary players I recommend to switch to the grenade based builds. Next up we have the grenade deadeye build, which deserves to be placed right in the C tier. This setup is the gas grenadier that has very high movement speed along with the lightning warp to teleport around even faster. So we will be exploding our gas grenade with the explosive shot. That will help us to clear big amount of enemy groups in just few seconds. By using the specific gear and building our skill tree around the nodes like the cluster bombs, point blank and many more, it will enable us to upgrade our grenades and projectile area and damage. Our general gameplay loop will consist of, first of all, while killing regular monsters, comboing our gas grenade once or twice into the explosive shot to detonate the gas for multiple explosions. Most of the enemies will die to a single gas grenade combo, so this build is pretty straightforward. Next we have the armor breaker warbringer, and we will place him right in the C tier. So developers fixed the bug where armor explosion could get triggered by itself, and thus this has obviously impacted the clearing speed of the warbringers while using the mage strike. Now most warriors opt in to drop the mage strike for the stampede skill, but to be honest, this is not anymore the same powerful build that could smash his way through the countless of enemies. Melee players already had a tough time compared to the other builds, and now it seems like they nerfed them even more. Next we have the Tempest Flurry Invoker, and he is also in the C tier. The Lightning Invoker got already nerfed in the first patch, but now it's been dropped even lower, as most of the players have figured out better builds, and thus comparing Flurry Invoker to the most other setups is just not even close. However, we have already new Invoker builds like using the Cold Element, and even the Acolyte of Chayula is showing promising setups. So if you are still using the Tempest Fury Invoker, then I strongly recommend you to switch to the Cold Invoker build. And then for the last and final, we have the Poison Pathfinder build, which is in the C tier. This build is not completely useless, but it was also massively impacted due to Divine Arrow and other damage over time effects getting nerfed. This build's playstyle was structured around specializing in dealing damage almost exclusively by spamming the gas and vine arrows, as because of our skill tree and gear, we were going to be able to delete trash enemies in split seconds. However, what I really liked about this build was its fast speed farming potential, as you could keep moving while dealing insane amount of poison effects. If you are a Pathfinder, I strongly recommend you to switch to a deadeye, or perhaps if you really don't want to, then the only builds I see viable for this ascendancy is to remove Divine Arrow and replace it with the Ghast Arrow and the Plague Barrier. Then next up we have the B tier, and for the first one we have the Storm Wave Acolyte of Chayula build. This setup is known as the Lightning Storm Monk, which uses the Acolyte of Chayula ascendancy that allows you to embrace the darkness by sacrificing spirits. This build will offer a unique playstyle focused on the lightning damage and the manipulation of the darkness powers. With the strong defensive capabilities of Embrace the Darkness, as well as the Life and Energy Shield Leech, the Acolyte of Chayula offers a great set of tools for survival, but where usually there was a huge drawback was in his lack of damage. But now there is a build that can easily compete and even outperform the Invoker Monk builds. So if you want to spam 2-3 buttons and then just obliterate anyone and everyone that stands in your way, then this is the one for you. Then for the next B tier build we have the Grenade Gemling Legionnaire. This setup also has become better, which now detonates the gas grenades, with variety of detonator skills such as the explosive shot or the explosive grenade, to create a screen-wide explosion that can one-shot massive amounts of enemy groups. Offensively, the gem-studded ascendancy allows us to use 2 copies of any support gem, which greatly improves our clearing speed, utility, and single target damage. And then defensively, we get access to efficient armor evasion scaling, life recovery, and maximum resistance scaling or the strength stacking. So when we combine all of this, we can then create this build that has insane clearing speed, and with this type of very fun run and gun playstyle. Then next up we have the Ignite Titan, and we will place him right in the B tier. In my opinion, if you are looking for the best melee build, then this is it. The main focus of this build is to scale the Ignite from attacks. Our main skill is the Hammer of the Gods, which does incredible amount of single target damage, with no element penalty, but it has a long cooldown. Ignite effect does damage based on the size of that hit that has been generated, and is more likely to ignite based on how big that is. Of course, like most melee builds, the armor explosion was nerfed, but as your main focus is on Ignite, so the Titan wasn't impacted as much as the warbringer. And then for the last and final B tier build, we have the Fireball Chronomancer. If before the patch the Hammer Chronomancer was dominating this ascendancy, then now there is a better option. So the Fire Chronomancer never runs out of mana, as he can simply go back in time by using the Temporal Rift. His main playstyle revolves around using the Frost Wall to then detonate the fireball that causes a chain effect of massive explosions that freezes your enemies and creates a massive number of projectiles that covers your entire screen. You can then reset your cooldowns thanks to the Nev again to then summon more Frost Walls, and then from here just rinse and repeat. Next up we have the A tier, and for the first build we have the Cold Invoker. This setup is extremely powerful because it locks down your enemies with quick freezes that last a long time. Even bosses are vulnerable to being frozen, while they are stuck doing absolutely nothing. Your main gameplay loop will revolve around using the Ice Strike to close the gap between the enemies. Then drop Tempest Bell to help you to do more damage, and then activate your elemental invocation before they can hit you or just nuke the boss. Then for the next A tier build we have the bonestorm Blood Mage. I was very surprised about this build, because until now the Blood Mage was really bad, because the life leech is just not working as intended. And especially at the start of the game, most builds were really struggling to keep up with this ascendancy. Because as a Blood Mage, if you did not get at least 2 or 3 ascendancy points, then you were completely useless as a character. But now instead we have the Bonestorm skill, which by itself is a slow clearing ability. But with the right gems, passives and synergies, we can make it 100 times better, and this is exactly what we have right here. This build also has 2 variants, so going full crit chance, what I personally like to do for myself, or perhaps go with the Detonate the Dead variant. Both of these excel at different things, so which one you choose is up to you. This variant, so the full crit chance setup, will excel at huge amount of enemy damage. We won't be focusing on anything else besides the massive crits and stacking as much life as possible, because the more life and defense we have, the more damage we can do in return. And then for the last and final A tier build we have the Cold Stormweaver. This setup focuses on one simple fact, the ability for enemies not to move. So what you do is build around freezing them with the Frost Bolt, then shattering them with the Cold Snap, and then finally causing a devastating comet to rain from the sky, which completely will destroy anything and everything that stands in your way. This build is especially good in leveling, but after finishing the campaign I would recommend to switch to the Spark setup. And now finally we have come to the S tier, and for the first one we have the Grenade Witchhunter. This setup is very unique because we are going to be freezing enemies with the permafrost bolts, which will give us frost fires. So then we will be able to drop explosive grenades and then detonate them with explosive shot, which will do massive amounts of damage. This build is great against bosses and other large enemy groups, as we can CC the enemy while our fuse is going on, and then when we detonate our AoE skills, then we will clear anything and everything that stands in our way. Then for the next S tier build we have the Spark Stormweaver. This setup is super fun and has insane amount of lightning damage. Also, as you can see, it is one of the most visually impressive builds in the game, as the sorceress paralyzes and destroys monsters with a barrage of lightning. Our build has insane mobility and great speed farming potential, by shredding through maps and hardened content with ease. The Archmage with the Lightning Condiant and the Spark skills together make up the bulk of our insane DPS. At some point in the later game, some lowered gear players might run into a mana problem, but lucky for us, the sorceress has many tools to address this problem. And with optimized gear, we need nothing more than a single stat roll on our weapon or gear to completely solve the issue. Next we have the minion army infernalist build, and we will place him right in the S tier. This setup is the spirit minion build, which summons bunch of raging spirits by casting the flame wall for the offense. And then also for defense, we get to command a minion army. So unlike most other setups where you only get to command or cast spells, well, in this one we get to do both, and thus increase our DPS even higher. By using specific gear and building our skill tree around the nodes like the power of the dead, fear the dead, silent guard, and many more, it will enable us to upgrade our minions and projectile area and damage. So if you're ready to explode anyone and everyone that stands in our way, while also getting a skeleton army that follows and protects you, then this is definitely for you. And now for the last and final S tier build, we have the lightning arrow deadeye. This setup is known as one of the best and fastest setups that you can use to farm maps and other endgame content. Like you can see from the gameplay, we are basically deleting enemies in split seconds. We can also delete bosses by having also a very high boss damage, by using the cast on shock and the ball lightning. At some point in the later game, some lower gear players might run into a mana problem, so likely you will want to get a mana on hit. But besides that, if you want to zoom through the content with the best build in the game, then the lightning arrow build is definitely for you. So let me know what you think about this POE tier list in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, then you definitely don't want to miss my top 3 best builds video, where I showed the most powerful builds with detailed guides. So click the screen now and I'll see you in the next one.